I'm not someone who enjoys traveling for work. Most of the time, it just feels like stress on the road. But about a year ago, I had a work obligation that required me to drive roughly 3 hours out of town. The destination was actually a pretty scenic area, the kind of place people visit on purpose. So I thought, why not bring my wife along? She always gets frustrated when I disappear for work trips, and this felt like a good compromise. She could spend the days exploring, hiking, checking out local shops, whatever she wanted, and I'd be free every afternoon and evening to spend time with her. We found a charming little rental house, private, tucked back from the road, surrounded by trees. Not isolated like some cabin in the middle of nowhere, but definitely separated from the neighbors. That first night, my wife walked through the house and said she could actually see herself owning a place like this someday. Cozy on the main floor, but it had a surprisingly large basement stuffed with storage boxes. At the time, we thought nothing of it. What happened over the next 3 days changed how I think about vacation rentals entirely. The first morning, I was up before 6 to get ready for work. When I turned off my alarm and rolled over, my wife wasn't in bed. I found her in the kitchen sitting on a bar stool, nursing a coffee, phone in hand. She looked exhausted. When I asked what happened, she said she woke up in the middle of the night and thought she saw a figure standing in the corner of the bedroom. She couldn't make it out clearly in the dark, but something about the silhouette made her skin crawl. She rolled over, tried to fall back asleep, then heard a faint noise from that same corner. After that, there was no sleeping. She'd been sitting at the kitchen counter since 5 in the morning. I felt awful. I could see the fear still sitting behind her eyes even in daylight. I got ready, kissed her goodbye, and she told me she was going to shower and spend the day in town. She didn't want to be alone in that house any longer than necessary. What she didn't tell me until lunch was what happened after I left. When she got out of the shower, the clothes she'd laid out on the bed had been moved. Not dramatically, but instead of neatly folded and stacked, they were loosely rearranged, almost like someone had gone through them and put them back carelessly. She tried to convince herself it was her imagination, but then she realized her socks were missing entirely. She knew she had set them out. Now they were gone. She grabbed a different pair and basically ran out of the house. Over lunch, she looked pale. I believed every word she said. I just had no explanation. If you think this story ends there, you're wrong. Stay with me, because what we found in that basement on the last night is something I still can't explain. We spent the rest of that afternoon in town, and it was actually a good time. My wife seemed to relax, and by dinner that evening, the color had returned to her face. But the middle of that night, she woke me up again. She said she heard something moving around in the house. And as soon as she said it, I heard it too. It was the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Not settling wood or a pipe groaning. Footsteps. She was shaking. She grabbed my arm and begged me to stay in the bed, but I had to know if someone was actually inside. I moved quietly through every room. Everything looked normal, until I noticed the closet door in the hallway was standing open. I told myself it must have just swung open on its own. It's an old house, it happens. I even checked inside. Nothing. I came back to the bedroom and told her we were safe. She didn't buy it. Neither of us slept after that. I just stayed up with her until morning. The next day, she begged to leave early. I had to tell her we needed one more night. I had a morning meeting I couldn't miss. I offered to book a hotel instead, but we'd already spent a lot on the rental. She agreed to push through one more night. We packed everything up that evening so we'd be ready to go right after my meeting. We ordered pizza, sat in the living room, tried to relax. We were playing a trivia game on my phone when we started hearing noises again, this time from the basement. Every time a sound came from down there, my wife would tense up like she'd been struck. I kept insisting it was just an old house. But eventually I decided to go check, mostly to prove to her there was nothing to worry about. I went down those stairs into the dim, cluttered basement. One weak bulb gave off a dull yellow glow. Storage boxes in every corner. I looked around and was just about to head back up when something in the far corner stopped me cold. A man was standing there. He was so still I genuinely thought it was a coat rack. Then he blinked. I was up those stairs in seconds. I told my wife to get to the car. Right now. I grabbed 2 bags, threw them toward the door, and ran back for the last one. As I moved through the house, I noticed the basement door had swung open behind me, and now the closet door was ajar too. I didn't slow down. I sprinted past both, threw the final bag into the back seat, and we drove off into the night. I called the rental company from the road. The woman on the phone argued with me, insisting I must have been mistaken. I was so furious I hung up on her. Looking back, that man had been moving through that house the entire weekend. The figure in the bedroom corner. The rearranged clothes. The missing socks. It was him. He had been living in that basement, and we had no idea. If you thought a stranger in a basement was terrifying, the next story takes it somewhere completely different. A luxury resort in Costa Rica where someone decided to make us their obsession. I like to travel, but I prefer not to go alone. At the time of this story, I was seeing a woman named Julie, and I managed to convince her to join me on a trip to a stunning resort in Costa Rica. For nights, all-inclusive, oceanfront, the kind of place that costs more than it should and looks better than the photos. The first 3 days were close to perfect. Then night 3 arrived. After dinner and a fire show on the beach, the crowd around the pool thinned out until it was just the 2 of us. We grabbed some drinks from our room and settled into the private hot tub surrounded by tropical plants. It felt like our own little corner of the world, until I noticed movement through the foliage. Someone was crouching on the other side of the bushes. Not walking past. Crouching, the way someone crouches when they're watching. I called out and climbed out of the hot tub, but by the time I got to the walkway, I caught only a glimpse of someone hurrying around the corner. I chased it down, but found nothing except a dark path leading directly toward our guest unit. We wrapped up for the night and headed back. On the path between the pool and our room, we heard something in the jungle, a heavy, deliberate rustling. Not birds, not small animals. Something large. I told Julie to go ahead inside, and I lingered for a second, looking into the dark tree-line. Then I heard it, a low droning sound. Not an animal. A person making a sound with their throat. Whatever was in there darted deeper into the jungle the moment I stepped forward. I ran inside and locked the door. The next morning we reported it to a staff member and tried to put it out of our heads. Later that day, a man in resort staff clothing approached us on the beach with a camera. He told us to smile, took our photo, and walked off. We expected him to approach other guests. Instead, he simply disappeared. We mentioned to each other that he looked nothing like the Costa Rican staff we'd seen everywhere else. This man was noticeably different. That night we fell asleep easily. We had an early flight the next morning. But I woke in the darkness to a sound I recognized immediately, the electronic click and beep of a camera shutter. I sat up. On the other side of our screen patio door, a dark silhouette was standing there. Still. Watching. I shouted. The shadow turned and ran. I slammed the patio door, woke Julie, and called the front desk. When a staff member arrived, I laid out the full timeline. The hot tub peeper, the strange man with the camera, and now this. He confirmed they have no employees doing photography rounds at night. They offered us a new room closer to the front entrance and promised to review 2 days of security footage. At checkout the next morning, they showed us the footage. The same man, walking the resort grounds, not approaching any other guests. Only us. Only ever us. They never found him. I followed up from home a few days later and received nothing but apologies. 2 strangers invading our space was horrifying enough, but the next story is a solo drive through Pennsylvania at night, and what waited for this driver in the fog is something out of a nightmare. I hate reliving this one, but it's too unsettling not to share. Last year, I had a week and a half off work and decided to drive home to see my parents. I work in South Carolina. They're up in Massachusetts. Long drive, but manageable. My genius idea was to drive straight through the night and surprise them in the morning. I told only my brother, just so someone knew I was on the road. I've done this route before and actually prefer it at night. Less traffic, easier drive. The part one dread is Pennsylvania. Long, winding mountain roads that seem to go on forever, and that state always seems to be soaked in fog. This night was no exception. I was gripping the wheel tight, navigating through what felt like a solid white wall when I hit a detour. An accident ahead had redirected traffic off the highway. I followed the signs until I had no idea where I was. No lights, no buildings, no other cars. My phone had no signal. I'd been driving for hours, and I was running on empty. I needed a place to stop, a gas station, a rest area, anything. I started dozing. I knew I should pull over, but convinced myself I could make it just a little further. I couldn't. My eyes closed for a beat too long and I lost control. I hit the guardrail, and the car rolled into a ditch. Somehow it landed right side up. I sat there shaking, trying to process what had just happened. My phone screen was shattered in the crash. The car wouldn't move. It was wedged in at an angle, one door barely operable. I crawled out and stood on the roadside, looking at the damage, with absolutely no plan. A few minutes passed. Then 2 headlights cut through the fog, moving slowly. A truck. It stopped, then reversed back toward me. An older couple inside. The woman leaned out the passenger window and said it looked like I could use some help. I hesitated. Middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. But what choice did I have? I nodded. The man got out and pulled a chain from the truck bed. The woman also got out. And that's when things got strange. She started walking toward me, slowly, not stopping, like she was intentionally closing the gap between us. She smelled bad. She started talking, rambling, really, about the land, about the government, all while slowly boxing me in toward the back of the truck. I kept nodding, trying to stay calm. She told me she had something really cool to show me in the bed of the truck. I declined. She insisted. Every time I tried to create distance, she cut me off. I glanced into the truck bed and saw a tarp with something underneath it. Then she called out a name. "Paul!" The tarp moved. A younger man rose up from underneath it, holding a knife. He lunged for me. I fell backward onto the ground, and when I scrambled to my feet, both men were converging. I ran into the woods. I was alone, in the dark, with no phone, being chased by strangers who had been hiding in a truck bed, and the nightmare was just getting started. I ran as deep into those woods as I could, veering off the road so they couldn't follow by vehicle or have a clean line of sight. The younger man chased me in, but I had fear and adrenaline on my side. I was faster. I found a place to hide and went completely still. I had no phone. No way to track how long I sat there. It felt like hours, but probably wasn't. Every sound the forest made became footsteps in my head. Every branch cracking could have been them. I stayed down and didn't move. Then I heard her voice. The old woman, somewhere in the trees, calling out to me in a sing-song way, calling me, "Sonny boy," telling me it was okay to come out, saying they'd pulled my car out of the ditch, and they didn't mean to frighten me. Her voice was calm, almost sweet. It made everything worse. She wasn't directly next to me, but close enough. I held my breath until I heard her voice fade. When I finally crept back to the road, my car was still in the ditch. She had lied. All my doors were hanging open. My bag had been emptied, and most of my belongings were gone. The interior had been slashed with a knife. Their truck was nowhere in sight. I didn't stay with the car. I walked. I walked for a long time in whatever direction felt like civilization, until I finally found a 24-hour gas station. The cashier wouldn't let me use the phone, but he called the police. When they arrived, they contacted my parents. My brother drove out and picked me up once it was daylight. The police weren't much help. I don't know who those 3 people were or what they actually intended. But I know they weren't just looking to rob me. Whatever they had planned involved that tarp, that knife, and getting me into the back of that truck. My parents were surprised to see me, just not the kind of surprise I'd been planning. The last story takes us somewhere beautiful. Key West, Florida, the last night of a dream vacation. And then 4 strangers with frozen smiles walked out of the dark. This one doesn't involve the supernatural. No ghosts, no voices in the woods. But in some ways, that made it more terrifying, because every part of it was completely, undeniably real. A couple of years ago, my girlfriend Ally and I were overdue for a real vacation. We're both nurses, and anyone who works in healthcare knows the kind of exhaustion that builds up. We live in New Hampshire and wanted sun and warmth, so we drove the 24+ hours down to Key West, Florida. Ally isn't a fan of flying, so we made it a road trip and stopped along the way. By the time we got to our oceanfront resort, we felt like we'd already earned the trip. For most of those 2 weeks, everything was exactly what we needed. We were relaxed, well-rested, and happy. Then came the last night. The moon was so bright it reflected off the ocean like a second light source. It almost didn't look like nighttime. Ally and I were stretched out on a beach towel, her lying back in my arms, listening to the waves. What she didn't know was that I had an engagement ring in my pocket. This was supposed to be the moment. I started getting sentimental, saying all the right things. She was warm and laughing, and then she went quiet. I thought she drifted off. But when I asked, she said she'd been distracted by 2 people standing nearby. She said it looked like they were staring at us. I sat up. Just as I did, the two people walked over and stood directly above us. A woman with wild curly hair and eyes that seemed almost entirely dark. She wore a beach cover-up and was holding the hand of a large man with a heavy beard and long brown hair in a bun, wearing an open red flannel with nothing underneath. They stood there, smiling, without saying a word. Ally asked if she could help them with something. The woman said slowly, in a voice that was too soft, "You two are quite beautiful, you know." I couldn't respond. Ally told them to leave us alone. The woman looked at me, then at Ally, then said, "No, thank you." Just that. Still smiling. Before we could process it, a second couple appeared. Same posture. Same unsettling smiles. They just stood over us like the first two, crowding closer without ever being explicitly threatening. The first woman looked up at them and said, "Look, a new couple." One of them eventually had a foot touching my leg. I stood up and stepped toward one of the men and said, "Take one more step." They all laughed. Then one of the men lunged at me. Both men beat me down while I was on the ground in the sand. The two women sat there laughing while Ally screamed and tried to intervene, until one of them shoved her down. The men picked me up and slammed me back into the sand next to her. All four of their smiles disappeared at once. One of them started reaching into the inside pocket of that flannel, and I knew what he was going for. I don't know what came over me, but I kicked the ankle of the woman standing closest to me as hard as I could. She stumbled in the sand. It was just 1 second of distraction, but I grabbed Ally's hand and we ran. We didn't stop until we were inside our locked room with the lights off. My face was bleeding. My ribs hurt with every breath. We didn't call the police that night. In the moment, we just didn't want anyone to know where we were. In hindsight, that was a mistake. The next morning we checked out early and were loading the car when we spotted the two women standing on a street corner nearby. They didn't see us at first. We got in the car, pulled out, and had to pass right by them as we drove past. Both of them looked up, recognized us, smiled, and waved like old friends. I still have the ring. We left Key West that morning and never went back. I realized this one doesn't fit the usual mold of a scary story. But being attacked by strangers who had no apparent motive, who smiled through all of it, is a kind of fear that doesn't go away. We were lucky to walk away. Not everyone does.